Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. For those of you who have just logged on, we have already completed a sound test, so thank you very much to everyone who helped out with that. So firstly, I'm just going to go through a little introduction to the Bright Contracts team. So firstly, there's Laura Murphy, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer here at Thesaurus Software. And Laura ran the Bright Contract ship solo for the past 8 years until I joined in 2021. And to introduce myself, my name is Jennifer Patton, and I am the HR consultant at Bright Contracts. And I'm responsible for the day-to-day upkeep of Bright Contracts, as well as answering any phone and email queries from our customers. But today, presenting with me on our webinar is Saoirse Maloney. She is our HR admin, and Saoirse assists me with writing our blogs for Bright Contracts on both our Irish and our UK websites. So thank you very much, Saoirse, for joining me today.
No problem, thanks for having me.
So just to let everyone know, this webinar is being recorded and all attendees will receive an email later today with a link to the recording. So it's no problem at all if anybody needs to pop off at any stage. If you do have any questions, you can type them into the questions box on your control panel at the side of the screen, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. Also, in the follow-up email, there will be a copy of today's presentation slides that we are using, so feel free to have a look at them as well. So firstly, we'll jump into discussing who Bright Contracts are, and I'm going to pass you over to Saoirse, where she'll tell you all about us.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Bright Contracts is a software package that has everything you need to create and manage a professional staff handbook and contracts of employment. Getting these in place has traditionally been an expensive, complicated and time-consuming process, but Bright Contracts makes it quick and easy. Without employee contracts in place, an employer is risking large settlements in the case of staff disputes and fines in the case of regulatory inspections. Having contracts also clearly defines the contractual relationship between you and your employees. Bright Contracts is the easiest way to get it sorted. So Bright Contracts is teaming with the useful and functionality, from the obvious to the obscure, yet it delivers it all in a neat and easy to use package. Some of our features of Bright Contracts includes all that there is no employment law content needed, so there's no research necessary for you. You don't need any HR employment law knowledge. There is free phone and email support, and you can export your company handbook and contracts as a PDF, which they can be then uploaded to employee profiles or emails, and etc.
Excellent, thank you, Saoirse. So I just wanted to pop in here with some interesting facts and a bit of information. So a survey that was published in HR Magazine detailed that 9% of employees actually don't get a contract until they've been in their role for 6 months or more, which is quite surprising, as the majority of employees receive their contract of employment either prior to them starting or at least within 5 days of them starting. And surprisingly, at least 2 million workers in Britain don't actually have an employment contract at all. And since April 2020, all employees have a legal entitlement to a written contract of employment when they start work. And the purpose of a contract is to give both the employer and the employee certain rights and obligations, and so they know what they are. So the most common example is that employees have a right to be paid for the work they do, and the employer has a right to give reasonable instructions to employees and for employees to work at their job, and these rights and obligations are what we call contractual terms. And so I suppose during the pandemic as well, we would have noticed that an awful lot of our customers were calling us and they were saying, I actually haven't had employment contracts for my employees before. And then obviously with the introduction of flexible or hybrid working, it became a necessity. So we had an awful lot of new customers coming to us who had never put together contracts before for their employees, and that's where we stepped in and we took all of the burden off them. And as Saoirse said, all of the HR content that's in our contracts and handbooks, it's all done for you. So you don't need to go onto Google and be researching everything that you can about what needs to be in contracts, because we have everything in there for you. Now, we do need to look at the repercussions if you don't give your contracts. What is the penalty for not issuing an employment contract? Well, immediately there's nothing. But if you are taken to tribunal for any other reason, whether it's unfair dismissal, discrimination, etc., then it will be added on to the employee's claim, and it could cost an extra 3 or 4 weeks' money for a company, which could come to an astronomical amount. So it will also be a sign for the court that you are not fulfilling your obligations under employment law, and it could be seen as a black mark against you. And the penalty for issuing a contract of employment could be as little as a few £100 at tribunal to thousands of pounds, and ultimately losing your case. So as I mentioned, since April 2020, employers now have to have all paid benefits, statutory or otherwise, written into the contract of employment. So for example, if you used to pay company sick pay at your discretion, that's obviously no longer possible with the introduction of SSP. And things such as holidays, pensions, and medical insurance, etc., they all have to be in the contract as well. And even those statutory benefits that you have no influence over, like SSP and maternity pay, they do still have to be in your contract. So that's vitally important as well, as this enables employees to potentially compare what they are paid for equal pay purposes as well. So I'll just pass you to Saoirse, where she'll discuss some of the recent software updates that we have had in Bright Contracts.
So one of the best things about Bright Contracts is that we do all the updates and the adding of new policies and procedures for you, which means for you that there is no countless Google researches or article reading. We do all the hard work. So here's our most recent content updates in the software's company handbook. So first we had the COVID secure guidelines, which this policy changed quite a few times over the past few months, based on the government guidance and the lifting of restrictions. We also then included a hybrid working policy in the handbook, but we also added a tick the box option to the contract itself, where those who were working hybrid could have details around their hybrid working arrangement added to their contract. And then the next, we had the hot topic at the moment in HR, which is the implementation of menopause policy to businesses.
Perfect, thank you, Saoirse. So now that you've heard our updates, what does our software actually look like is the next question. So I have some snippets of the software here to run through with you, just to give you a quick insight into what the software looks like and the kind of content it contains. So first up is the company handbook, and this is where all of your company policies and procedures are contained. So this example here is the maternity leave section in the handbook. As you can see, it kind of looks like it's like a little bit of like a scrapbook. So you have your content there. There's a standard. You get to choose your standard heading font and size and things like that. So it all looks uniform, and it just all is very presentable. So this is what the section would look like in your software when you click on maternity leave. And this is found in our leave and benefits section of the company handbook. Now, the sections of the handbook, they are completely editable. So for example, if there was anything that you wanted to add on to policies that are in the handbook, you are free to do so as you wish. The contract is editable as well, but it is a little bit more restricted compared to the handbook. The handbook, you can add in as many extra chapters or make as many edits as you like. You just always cater towards what works best for your company. And as I previously mentioned, when there are any updates to legislation, we update the handbook or the contract content for you. And when we do the software update, you'll see this yellow bar when you log in, letting you know that there is an update. But we don't automatically update the software for customers. It may be a topic that maybe they aren't ready to put into their handbooks yet. So we let them choose when they update their software. So before you click update now, you can see here beside the skip this update button, it says more info, and we put in there our notes in relation to what the update might be. So for example, when we were putting in the menopause policy, our release note would have been, our software now contains a menopause policy. This can be found in the in the company policies and procedures section of the handbook. And if it is an update that you would like to take, then you just simply click update now. Or you can simply skip this update, and when you next open Bright Contracts, the yellow bar still will be there. So don't worry if you click skip this update and then you decide that you actually do want it. When you log back out and log back in, it will be there readily available for you. Now, this is the exact same process when there is an update to the contract side of things as well. So if you make an update to the handbook and the contract separately, the yellow bar pops up on both sides to do the update. When you click update now in handbook, it doesn't automatically update the contract as well. It's just to make sure that if customers want specific content and others that they don't, that we're not upgrading their software on them. So it's entirely up to the customer what updates they would like to take or not. And speaking of the contract, this is a preview of the contract section of the software. Now, the image on the left is a snapshot as to what information is asked of the employer to input for the employee. So it might be a bit hard to see there, but it would just be all of the basic details: the employee's name, their address, what their work start times, finish times are, where their place of work is, things like that. There's 5 tabs that you need to work through and populate for each employee. But a great feature about Bright Contracts is, let's say, for example, you have 10 employees who are all general operatives in a business. So they all have the same contract terms, but obviously the difference will be, let's say, if it's the rate of pay. So once you create a contract for the first general operative, when you go to make one for your next employee, you can actually copy the previous general operative contract that you created. So it just saves an awful lot of time in you going through it and picking the hours and everything again. But it knows to pull across the details of the new employee. So it's not going to pull across that previous employee's personal details. It will pull through the new employees. So it's just a very handy feature, and it's really time saving as well for the person who's creating the contracts. And then before you look at printing or sending off any contracts, you can actually preview what it will look like first of all. And that's what the image on the right is here. So you'll see that's just a quick snapshot as to what the contract will look like. As I said before, you get to pick the text and the font size. As you can see, it looks really well there, and you don't have to worry about any formatting issues or anything. So once you've previewed it, it just enables you to see if there's anything that you need to change, if there was maybe a typo in the address or things like that, and you can just easily go back and edit it. And then you can either export it as a PDF and upload it to, let's say, for example, if you use BrightPay, which is our payroll software, if you use BrightPay Connect, where they have their own employee profile, you can upload it to there and have it that they can view it there as well. Or you might be emailing them or printing them out. Whichever option it may be, they're all available on the software. So lastly, let's cover the pricing options for the software. So for those of you who may not know, with Bright Contracts, there are 2 licensing options available, and they are the standard license or the bureau license. And the difference between them is a standard license is best suited to single employers. So for example, if your company is called ABC Limited and you're just creating contracts for your own employees and your own staff, you'd use a standard license. Whereas if you're a bureau license, this is, for example, any solicitors or accountants or anyone like that who creates contracts for multiple clients, and therefore you will have multiple companies in your Bright Contracts. So that would be best suited to them. So a license that you get with either of these allows for 2 software activations. And what that means is, for example, if you are doing hybrid working and you have a computer in the office and one at home, you can activate Bright Contracts on both computers. And your license is valid for 12 months from the date of activation. It's not from the date of purchase. So for example, if I purchase my license today, but I don't actually activate it until the 1st of April, then my 12 months begins on the 1st of April rather than today, the 28th of March. Now, these prices quoted here, they are excluding VAT, so just to take note of that. But both come as well with free phone and email support as well. But you don't need to take our word for it. We're probably a bit biased in how good we think our software is. But we just have a few of our customer comments here about our software, which I'll just briefly read out for you. So creating contracts for a small business, I found it easy to use. I can edit it to my own needs. It includes all the up-to-date legislation for employment. The backup support is very helpful. I found Jennifer easy to contact and her advice was very useful. As a small business owner and one that has to wear many hats in the day-to-day running of the business, this software is invaluable. For a small investment in time once a month, it is easy to remain on top of all contract obligations. Support is great and all communication is relevant to our business. I would recommend the product. As our company contracts can be very similar to each other's, Bright Contracts allows us to repeat the same type of contract, only changing small parts if needed. The fact that the system alerts us if a new policy might need to be integrated in the handbook is one of the best features of this software. Bright Contracts helps us to stay compliant at all times. Overall, a very good software that I would recommend. So it's great for us to hear our feedback from our customers. We like to hear whether it's good or bad, but we have found over the years, our customers have actually given us ideas on things that we could maybe change or tweak here and there, and that's why our software is as good as it is today. So I just want to say thank you so much to our customers for their input. It really is valuable. Now, we do have a number of online sources where you can hear about any updates we make, whether it's to our blogs or if it's to our software, if we have any upcoming webinars. We post all of this information on our LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but also on our website itself, which is www.brightcontracts.co.uk. Now, we also have a YouTube page where you can not only see tutorials on how to use certain aspects of the software, but we actually upload recordings of our previous webinars as well. So you can catch up with them at your own leisure. And today's webinar will also be uploaded to YouTube as well. So you can also view it there. So that brings us to the end of our presentation today. I know we covered a lot, but we will send everyone an email later today, and it will include a copy of the slides as well as a link to the recording of today's webinar. I just want to say as well, for those of you interested in seeing a demo of Bright Contracts, we do have a survey at the very end of the webinar when you go to exit, where you can register your interest and we will have a member of our team follow up with you as well. Now it's time for the questions and answers. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the question box and we'll try and get through as many questions as possible. Now, we do have a lot of attendees logged on today, so unfortunately, if we don't have a chance to answer every single question, we will follow up with you after the webinar. So I see one question here in relation to linking with BrightPay Connect. So in relation to Bright Contracts and BrightPay, there is kind of an integration, and why I say kind of is that it integrates in the sense that you can directly import your employees' details to Bright Contracts, but this doesn't create I suppose what you'd call a live link between the two. So for example, I had a question from a customer before who asked, if I import from BrightPay today and I add 10 new employees in 2 months' time, would it automatically be added to the Bright Contract system? And no, it does not. But when you're importing from BrightPay or even the source software, you can choose what employees that you want to import. So if you have 10 employees you're importing today, and then you actually have 15 in 2 months' time, you can just select the 5 new employees and import them. So when editing the handbook or contracts, how do you identify what is law and what is advised? So when it comes to us creating our content for Bright Contracts, first of all, we obviously look at, okay, what is required by employment law? So we have everything that is required by law in your contracts, but we also have any additional kind of policies or clauses that protect the employer. And that's the main point as well of contracts. It's to offer protection to both sides and to make sure that both know what is expected and what are, I suppose, the repercussions for certain aspects, whether it's to do with disciplinary and things like that. But we do our research thoroughly to make sure that what we have included is not only correct, but also correct in alignment with employment law. And so, for example, when it came to during COVID and having to have the COVID secure guidelines, as Saoirse mentioned, that was changing an awful lot based on government guidance. And from that, we were making the changes to our content as well. So we're always double checking and verifying that information to make sure we're giving the absolute best information. Can we have more than one standard contract? For example, one for teachers and one for support staff. So when you create your contracts, it's up to you what way you structure that contract. So for example, if the teachers have different hours to the support staff, let's say Mary is employee number 1 and she's a teacher, you'll create her contract and what her hours are, etc. And then let's say the next employee is Catherine, who supports staff, you'll create her contract. And then if you have more teachers and support staff that have the similar contracts to them, when you're copying a contract, you just simply find the employee's name. So you'll find Catherine's contract and you can clone her one, or for example, Mary's, you can clone hers. It all comes up with the name and the date as well that the contract was created. So you always know, okay, the last one I created for Catherine was on the 28th of March. That's the one that I'm copying down. So it's very easy to know which contract that you're copying for the employee. So can contracts be sent electronically and be signed and returned electronically? At the moment, no. That is something that we are looking at. Just unfortunately, development-wise, it isn't an easy thing to complete. Unfortunately, it is going to take a lot of trial and testing to do. What we do ourselves in relation to contracts is we use DocuSign, and you can upload your document. You choose where the signature is, so it's always on the last page if you're using our contracts, and you can choose who signs it. So for example, we'd have that the employee signs it and a member of HR, and you just simply put in their email addresses, and you basically use a drag and drop function, which lets you put, okay, I want the employee to sign here and I want the head of HR to sign here. And it sends an email to both parties to sign the contract, and then they both get an email when both sides have signed, and you have your complete signed contract, and then you can just save it down to the employee file and give them a copy as well. So that's the way that we do it at the moment, to do it electronically rather than printing out contracts. Is there already a Mac version available? If not, when will it become available? So at present, it is only available on a Windows computer, but there is a workaround to get it working on a Mac computer, which I use myself. And the software that you use, it's called Vmware Fusion. And what that does is essentially it is a program that's on your computer. When you activate it, it creates a Windows screen on your Mac. So it's basically a program in itself. Now, VMware Fusion isn't a free product to use. If you Google for similar options to VMware Fusion, there are a number that come up, and as far as I'm aware, some of them are free. We've just personally found that VMware Fusion works best for us. Some customers have used other ones though as well, because they mightn't be in a position to pay for VMware Fusion. So definitely it's worth taking a look, and if you wanted some of the options, I do have some on my computer. I've taken note of some of them. So Marcel, if you want to even send me an email at support@brightcontracts.co.uk, and I can share those with you. And if anyone else wants those options as well, if they're a Mac user, just send me a quick email and I can send that information on to you as well. Can we edit the contracts to include specific additions, i.e. different scenarios around holidays and how they should be requested? So you wouldn't have in your contracts how holidays are requested. This would be detailed in your handbook. So as I said, with the handbook, it is completely editable. We obviously have a section there around holidays and annual leave, but it can be edited to add the specifics around how holidays are requested in your business. So for example, some businesses, they may have that employees can't take holidays during specific periods of the year. They just simply edit the section and they can input that detail. And the detail around annual leave that's in the contracts, it's all very standard. It doesn't detail, for example, oh, they should be requested through such and such a person in HR. It's all very standard text as to what you'd see in other contracts. So it's more so in the handbook that will be where you'd detail any specific additions that you need to make. So how do employees sign the contract? So as I mentioned there, you could use DocuSign, or some of our customers do still use paper-based. So you can get the signed copy that way. Or some, obviously, if their employees aren't physically in the office, some companies are still on a remote basis. Even an email is sufficient for them to reply and say, I accept and understand the terms and conditions of my contract of employment. That's acceptable as well. If we have a contract already, do you check this over or we just use your new ones? So unfortunately, we're not a consultancy service, so we don't actually review customers' contracts. In relation to our Bright contracts, it would be that you'd use our content that's on it. There's no functionality for customers to upload their own handbook or their own contracts. It is just our content specifically. And so if it was a case that you were looking to completely give out new contracts to your employees, certainly you could use Bright contracts. But in relation to reviewing your current contracts, you'd have to consult a consultancy service, I'm afraid. Do I have to reissue contracts using the software for existing staff? I prefer to just mark off that the member of staff has a contract. So it depends. Like an awful lot of our customers, they would have only really been reissuing contracts to staff if, for example, like obviously, as I mentioned, with the hybrid working, that was a change in the terms and conditions of employees and contracts. So we strongly suggested that everyone gave out new contracts because that was a new change in their working life. If there's no changes to either a company name or the duties that an employee has to carry out or the rate of pay, things like that, there wouldn't really be a need to reissue contracts. If it was a case that your business was being sold and someone else was taking over ownership and things like that, you'd obviously do new contracts. But if you're just getting the software now because you want to use it for new staff going forward, absolutely fine to just start issuing contracts for the new staff going forward. There's no need to go back to the other staff, unless it was a case that you just wanted to align T's and C's, because some employees I know, they might have started 10 years ago and that was the last time that they had a contract. So it's completely understandable if you want to reissue a new contract then, but if it's probably been within the last year or two, I wouldn't see the need. Can the contract pages be branded with the company logos? So there is functionality in the software that you can upload your company logo and you can choose if it is shown on the front of your handbook or on your contracts. So you have the option, either the logo can show with the company name, or you can just have the company name, or you can just have the logo. It's up to customers which they prefer, and you can use the preview option in the software to see how it looks first of all. We have a mix of customers who use their logo and others just use the company name. So it's up to you which you prefer. If there's an update to employment law, do you have to update all contracts and reissue to all employees, or can we just advise the employees of the specific updates? So Any updates that come, it is very rarely that it's ever to the contract itself. It will be policies and procedures that are in the handbook. So in that case, if you have issued out your handbook to your employees today, and let's say in 6 months' time there's a change to a policy, you can actually just reissue that specific section of the handbook. So you can print it out, you can email it, you can just do that specific section and distribute that to your employees. That will be sufficient. And then just a question about customer support. Do you pay extra for customer support? So the simple answer here is no. Once a license is purchased, you get free phone and email support 5 days a week from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. What if I have forgotten to give out a new contract by the end of the employee's first day of employment? Is the employee entitled to compensation? So there is a set amount of compensation due if you have failed to provide a contract of employment. And the financial penalty, it's capped at 2 or 4 weeks basic pay, which can equate to between £1,000 to about, I think it's like £2,300. But most tribunal awards are for the lower amount rather than the higher amount. But that being said, it is important to note that employees do not have an automatic right to compensation. Like, despite there being a set amount due for not issuing a contract, employees actually have no right to bring a standalone claim against an employer for failure to provide a contract of employment. And what I mean by that is that any claim for not issuing a contract must be attached to another type of tribunal claim. For example, if it was an unfair dismissal claim or unlawful deductions from wages, etc. And that claim has to be successful as well. Okay, I think I have hit most questions. I just want to double check to make sure if I have missed any. If there is any that I have missed, I will be going through all of these questions again at the end when I'll be putting together the video and everything. So if I have missed anything, I have everyone's email addresses to get back to them as well. Oh, and just one here, actually, which is a great question. So the additional bank holiday this year, do I give this leave to my employees? Now, this has been a big question from a number of customers, and this depends on whether your terms of employment contract provide for a period of annual leave with public holidays on top. So the law on holidays is, it's from the working time regulations, and under that, workers are entitled to 5.6 weeks holiday a year, but no particular days are specified. So that means there's no statutory right to be off work on public holidays. But if your contract of employment says your employees are entitled to all bank holidays without specifying that these are the usual 8, then you'd pay for the additional day this year. So does this work with Apple Macs? Modular doesn't, and we went through a load of hassle before finding out, so we want to know in advance. Oh, sorry. So hopefully, Fiona, you heard my answer on that in relation to that. Technically, it's not available for Mac, that you can get the workaround using a software like VMware Fusion. If you want to send me an email at support@brightcontracts.co.uk, I can send you some of the alternatives to VMware Fusion that can work. Do you cater for 0-hour contracts? So we cater for a number of different contract types in the software, and you choose them as a drop-down option. If you aren't sure of what contract relates to your employee, because we do have ones that are like specific purpose or casual contracts and things like that, we do have some guided text in our software. So for example, next to certain sections where we look for information from you, we have like a little, it's a little icon of like a little piece of paper. And when you click that, it just gives some guidance as to what suggested text could go into that section. So we have that around the contracts as well. But that is one of the options that's on it, yes. Okay, well, I think we'll finish it up there. Thank you very much to everyone who attended our webinar today. It has been a pleasure to have you on. If you have any questions at all at Bright Contracts, you can contact us by email or by phone, and we'll be happy to answer your queries. As I stated again in the at the end of the webinar here, when you go to log off, there is a little survey if you wouldn't mind filling that in. And you can also let us know if you'd like a member of our staff to follow up with you about a demo of the software, or even if you just want a follow-up call to answer some questions, please feel free. I would like to mention as well that with Bright Contracts, you can actually download a free trial of the software. So I'll actually include that in the follow-up email, the link to it, where you can download the software and you can actually try it out yourself. There's no 30, 60-day minimum free trial or anything like that. You can use it as long as you like, but it gives you a quick snapshot as to what information is used, how you can use the software, what exactly your company handbook might look like, things like that. Now, there's only a specific amount of content that's shown, obviously, in the free version. You unlock the full functionality when you have a license, but I always find that that's a great way for customers to see if it will work for their business. So I'd certainly recommend trying that out. So I'll put that into the follow-up email. Or if you go onto our website and you select the Try Buy tab at the top of the web page, you'll see the download option there as well. But thank you so much for attending, and we hope to have you all again on our future webinars. But thank you so much and have a great day.